What's up, summoners? King Blair here. Today, we're going to be going over the most recent balanced patch adjustment, discussing my thoughts on it, which heroes are likely to do a pretty big impact, which heroes are kind of okay, and my overall thoughts on this patch. As always, there'll be sections where you can skip around to the different subjects. Without further ado, let's get right into it. And if you like the video, make sure you like and sub and all that good stuff. Without further ado, let's just jump right in. So as far as to my overall thoughts this patch, we have been getting a lot more balance patches. It feels like the last one just happened, which is why when I woke up this morning, I was shocked that we actually already had another one. As far as the heroes that they chose, pretty unique ones. Dark Corvus, we did see in a patch, the 2 patches ago, I believe. Briar, we haven't seen in a long time. And Astronaut Elena, it was almost a matter of when, because everyone knew when this unit came out, she was pretty underwhelming, right? There was definitely a lot of work that she could get, so we'll see how she is. Sez is final in this patch, which is amazing. Celine is kind of weird because she's been in a lot of different patches. And then Yufine, who seems to be in almost every single patch, dude. They keep trying to make this unit like broken for some reason. I don't know why they keep trying. They've reworked it like 3 times at this point and like buffed her twice. It's crazy how much they have done to this unit. But yeah, overall, I mean, not bad. I mean, we're getting such frequent patches. I think Sez is really cool, and all the MLs are heroes that they need a little bit of help. So it's definitely cool to see. There's a lot of other heroes that need some help. So it's kind of weird that they put Yufine in there. But outside of that, I mean, it's not a crazy patch. As far as the artifacts, it's a nice little selection update. I don't think it's any artifact that's going to be like, oh, this artifact is a must-have now, but it gives a lot of different updates. And the small little thing where now, if it says it'll always guaranteed as a crit, it goes through anti-crit, which is actually pretty nice for units like Charlotte. So this is kind of like an indirect buff to Charlotte. She's probably the biggest one here who really benefits from this because she had a bad matchup into Senya. Just because Senya anti-crit was 50% and Charlotte could miss on Senya and then you could actually die. So Charlotte's actually a really good Senya counter now, which is really cool. People still struggle with Senya. She's not as strong as she was last season. I still use mine a lot, but it's definitely something that's there for the people that do struggle for her. But with that, let's go to different units. And again, you're probably coming here if you wanted to learn about each of them. But let's actually go through them. So first, Dark Corvus. I feel like a lot of people think this is not enough for Dark Corvus. And I could see why, but I definitely think he's viable now outside of just Guild Wars, right? I definitely think he has a lot of potential outside of just Guild Wars with this new update. First thing, the provoke, it's nice. You know, it's a nice quality of life change, making it up to date. Most provoke heroes now have a 100% chance to provoke. Like Senya is a little bit conditional, but SCC, Crimson Armin, like a lot of these heroes have the 100% chance to provoke. It's kind of nice that you got that. The immune to stun, that's where we start getting a little bit of spice as well as the cooldown reduction. And you'll be thinking, how is that going to make this unit viable? But like, it's just these 2 small little things. You can tell me an immunity to stun is that big of a difference? Yes. 2 reasons why. First, Solitaria. She's a unit that's actually seeing a lot of play, and a lot of people like to play Solitaria in no DPS drafts. Like, we're talking 0 damage. Solitaria is the only DPS, and they just want to control you to death, right? And she has a forced AoE, though. And that's usually one of the things you punish about a Solitaria player, is she's forced to AoE with that extra skill. Well, now Dark Corvus, with a little bit of help from Durandal, can easily cycle with Solitaria hitting him all the time, giving him stacks, who's now at lower cooldown, immune to stun, so unless she has some cheeky artifact like Cyril Ren and somehow lands to sleep at the perfect time every single time to Durandal, you're going to be winning those games, right? And against any low DPS draft, this is actually really, really cool. So overall, really, really cool buff. Is it going to make this unit broken? No. Is it going to make him viable? Absolutely. Are you going to see him every match? No. But he's much better into things like Arrowwell, into those low Arrowwell solo DPS drafts. You can very, very hard punish. Like the Stina Arrowwell is very popular right now. As many of you guys may know if you're playing RTA. If you're playing Dark Corvus in those type of situations, he has Extinction, so he can stop the Stina. He does great damage, and now he's immune to stun, so he's not as easily controllable, right? So very, very nice little quality of life change that definitely will up his play rate, as well as Cleave potentially being able to anchor, which is pretty nice as well. But now we get to probably and arguably the largest winner of this patch, which is going to be none other than Briar Iseria. I had to reread this one like a couple times because I am still in shock on how much they actually buffed about her. So what you see there for the S1, that's just them moving her passive. So her passive used to have this extra damage on hit. They just moved it to her other skills that if it's successful attack, you deal extra damage. Because they added a little bit extra passive and they don't like having just a massive block of text, right? For one passive. But that's basically just her old passive. Nothing changed in her S1. Her S2 is where you have one of the buffs. So the first buff is going to be now that she has 50% hit chance, right? This was very much needed because she actually could still lose to Remnant Rylet, right? And now Light Adden is another hero that's seeing a ton of play, another Dutch hero that with this 50% extra, you only have 20% chance to miss, which you can just supplement by giving her symbol, which I don't know if she's the best candidate to give her symbol, but also Misha, which is a ranger artifact. You can get it up to 70% if you're struggling with those evasion units. You now have a unit that can reliably hit them. That is really cool, right? If you're struggling against Light Adden, if you're struggling against Ryland, this will definitely help. It definitely makes it updated. The other one is all allies and enemies cannot revive. I think this is the first buff that also affects your team. It's almost like a debuff for the whole field, right? So it's like, imagine if Belian just stopped souls, period. That would actually be pretty unique, right? So it is interesting that they have made it so it's both allies and enemies cannot revive. Pretty interesting there. And it's pretty relevant because there's a lot of revivers that are meta. Destina being the biggest one. I mean, you're going to see me say Destina a lot. She's very strong right now, if you didn't know already. So very good for Destina. But the biggest change is going to be her S3. They really, really pushed the envelope on how much of a support unit she is. So now she has a 70% chance to decrease defense. She strips and unable to be buffed, right? So before it was attack break and unbuffable. Now it's decreased defense, which is the best debuff in the game because decreased defense, you're basically just killing with like straight hits. And on top of that, you also get the, but granted, it's only a 75% chance, and the unbuffable and the strip, right? And on top of all of that, you can soul burn it to ignore F-Res. This is the one that really is going to push Briar Witch Iseria to be a very, very scary unit. It's hard to think on what teams are going to use her. One thing to note though, if you haven't used Briar Witch, her damage is not crazy. So if you're worried that you're like, man, Briar Witch not only can do a ton of damage, she's also going to debuff my team, GG, this unit's broken, right? Well, she's actually she doesn't do that much damage. Does she do damage? Yes. Can she be a secondary DPS? Yes. Is she going to be a main DPS? No. Especially because they took away the damage on her soul burn, right? She's not a big, heavy hitter DPS type of unit. This makes her more of a setup. It also is a little bit awkward to use because she doesn't have her own bridging. She is not able to CR push her team up to get advantage from these insanely nasty debuffs. But think about it like a Ran. And Ran right now, it's a little bit rough to use Ran because he's water. He can miss on a lot of the earth heroes. Briar Witch can't miss, right? So in a way, she's like Ran in that aspect. But she's able to actually hit these targets a lot easier and stop the revive. So she's going to be used more like a Ran in a more aggressive type team composition where you can actually make use of these super nasty debuffs, dude. This unit definitely is going to be strong. It's just a matter of how strong, right? Is she going to be a hero that's used almost every single time by cleavers because it's just such strong debuffs? She has immortality. She has access to guiding light, which means you don't have to worry about getting outsped by Zeo or by Azid, and you're still able to land those nasty debuffs, and you can hit things like Laden and counter things like Destina, which are very popular anti-cleaves. Yes, that's most likely what she's going to be used. Is she going to rise above and be a hero that's just a staple? That's still to be seen. Really, really strong hero. Will be interested to see how strong she is, but she is definitely going to be strong, right? Just so nasty. This is such a nasty effect to counter certain teams, like revive-oriented teams. But now we move to Astromancer Elena, who basically now is actually able to do her original gimmick. This is another hero that her ratios didn't get upped that much, or at all. The only thing she really got was the buff that she gets at the start of the battle now. But essentially, she gets Star's Blessing at the start of the battle. When she has it, your enemy cannot counterattack. That's really nice. That was one of the biggest issues with ML Elena, is if you missed the debuff on the Lion, you still got countered. So it was kind of troll. It was a little bit troll. So now you don't actually have to land anything. As long as you bring Elena, you're blocking your opponent from counterattacking. That's pretty nice, right? That will be really nice for things like Chu and Guild Wars, for Senya and Guild Wars, right? You don't have to worry about these heroes in Guild Wars that used to counterattack all the time, right? You just bring Elena, boom, you're blocking them out from doing that. All you have to deal with is to conquer Lilius and then slowly deal with the Chu and the Senya, whatever. You know, they're not going to do that much if they're not countering, right? Very, very predictable at that point. You can just put a tank, GG, no re, go next, right? Same thing in Arena. You slap this bad girl in Arena, you already have her passive, right? You already don't have to worry about Rem countering, have to worry about Belian countering, right? That's really nice that she can just start with that and get it after her S3. The other thing is they also made it so she gets the Combat Arenas 20%, so they increased it. But the problem is they took away the AoE one, which it's pretty interesting because they made her a little bit more selfish. Before it was one of those things that's like, oh, everyone gets the extra CR, but now it's increased in readiness of the caster, which is kind of nice because you can actually set her up with other heroes. You actually get to buff herself up to do her things, and you get the souls to do things with. But again, it's a little bit weird. It's a little bit different. Granted, no one was really playing ML Elena. This is basically just like reworked to how she should have been released, where people can actually think of how they want to use her. More selfish, but gets more CR push that way. I personally think it would have been cool to do all allies 15%, but I get the 20% so she can actually follow up if she needs to. The other one is she gets the buff, again, that nice little buff that stops counterattacks. She gets it when she does S3. 4-2 turn, they actually nerfed the cooldown. They made it 5 turns. I don't know why that's in green. That is technically a nerf. It's just really weird how they decide their coloring. It's green if it's a change, if it's red if it's an old. I don't like it, but yes, that is technically a nerf. They nerfed the cooldown, so you can't just block counterattacks the whole game. You actually have to cycle through it. You have to kind of win off those first 2 to 3 turns. And of course, the damage is based on her new thing where she gets 15% attack and critical hit damage. Nice little buff, right? Hopefully she can do some damage, especially because she's much more selfish now and gets a lot more CR bar. But it'll be interesting how people actually use her. I mean, definitely for Guildos and Arena, I definitely probably will build mine just so I can actually use her because she's a really cool looking unit and she'll definitely have a place in Guild Wars and in Arena to counter a lot of those annoying counter attack teams by just slamming her in there. You just slam her, boom, GG, go next. Now, as far as says, my boy actually finally got a buff. This was my first 5-star when I first started Epic 7. It's crazy to see him here. As far as says, he's very unique buffs. It's things that are already in the game, but it's just very interesting with his kit, right? So they moved the passive, again, they moved it to the S1. They've been doing that with a lot of heroes. So now S1's really long, but essentially it's just the old S1. When the health is 50%, it's legit just the old passive, but they just moved it up, right? So his passive used to be this massive Texas block that you activate Encroach when an enemy is below 50%, and you have a chance to make them unkillable, damage based on health. That used to be his passive, right? They just moved it to the S1. That's it. That's all they did. It literally was just his passive. I guess it's just something they're trying to do consistency's sake, but there shouldn't be any change there. The new passive, that's going to be new. They gave him the T-Cern passive, which is the you can't die to one shot. And Roy also has this passive. Emil Celine has this passive. But what's really nice is that when you're attacked, you get stealth for 1 turn, and you can only activate it once per turn. With Lifesteal Cess, with how heavy single target this meta is, this will let him take a turn. Maybe 2, maybe more, right? Because being able to stealth in this meta right now is incredibly nice because, again, there's a lot of single target damage threats. Stena is a single target damage threat. Airwell is a single target damage threat. Granted, she's a support type unit, but it's single target. Zeal, single target damage threat. Even cleavers like Sid, it's a single damage threat. Rylet, single damage threat. A lot of the big meta DPS heroes are going to be single target focused, right? So it's really nice that he's able to stealth and avoid some of the damage, take his turn, heal a little bit, and do damage. Once per turn, that is what it is. I mean, it's just going to be you won't die right away. And then, of course, the S3, when the enemy is defeated, they give him a little bit of extinction, and they also buff the damage. That's the part that I'm like, man, how much did they buff this damage? Because cess bombs used to be pretty nasty back in the day. They used to do a lot of damage. So I am curious by how much did they buff this? Because that's going to be the difference of whether this unit is viable or not. Overall, I definitely think he is viable. I think he definitely has opportunity to be in the meta. He has ways to actually get to what he wants to do now. Not as much of a cleave unit as he used to be, although people, depending on this S3. If this S3 is just filthy amount of damage, cleavers are going to pick him up because he's a hero that you can't one-shot, which is always wanted because that means you have ways to stop a lot of anti-cleave like K-Ron, BBK, right? Especially if you're on lifesteal. So it'll be interesting to see how much damage this S3 does and what people do with him. Kind of a hard hero to know who he's going to be, but definitely more viable. No clue how strong he's going to be. Pretty hard to predict that. But just overall, stealth is really good right now. Not that one turn is really, really nice right now. So overall, really nice buffs. Yufine, I honestly, I'm not a fan of these buffs as far from a PvE standpoint. I know a lot of people actually use their Yufines in PvP. I don't understand why they just didn't make another hero why did they have to give it to Yufine? That's my thoughts on it, because they essentially just made a new hero. They took away old Yufine and just made a new hero, and they've been doing this a lot. But Yufine is the most recent one. So why do I say that? Well, her S2 doesn't give speed buff anymore. It gives defense buff, which is better for PvP, worse for PvE. The other thing is they changed the soul burn to be on the S2 to give her an extra turn instead of it being on the S3. They also took away the S3 strip, and they took away her effectiveness buff, which again, that's another PvE aspect. But what they gave her instead, and that's just like summarizing what you're seeing here, because I don't want to go through every single little change. But basically what they took away her strip on S3. Hopefully they don't take away damage on the S3. That's what I'm really worried about, because if they take away damage from the S3, a lot of people actually used her for that. So hopefully that's not taken away. But she's a much better PvP unit. She can actually combo with things like Zeo, because what they gave her instead of all these like effectiveness things is that when an enemy is silenced and hit when silenced, you get a 20% CR push unconditional as long as you're hitting a silenced unit. Yufine is getting a 20% bar, of course, if her S3 is off cooldown. So you could theoretically use Zeo, silence someone, push Yufine up 20%, and then Yufine can penetrate their defense with S3 70% and reset the cooldown. So now if you silence another hero, she gets another 20%. And you can also do the S2 to self-buff attack with soul burn. So like Seal Yufine just makes the most sense, right? Seal silences the enemy. You have the soul burn, the new soul burn. You can soul burn S2. Potentially silence one more person with Yufine, get her attack buff, get her defense buff, S3, blow up the hero that got silenced, and now you can cycle a little bit more with the other silenced heroes, right? Very similar to Specimen Cess. Will she be strong? No clue. She's going to be closer to like a Specimen Cess tier. When the debuff land, it's going to feel great. When the debuffs don't land, it's going to feel absolutely terrible. So it's going to be one of those type of heroes where you very much rely on actually landing your debuffs to actually do your job. But very different from what she used to be, right? So weird that they keep changing her. This is like her second, third rework. And she's been on these balance patches way too much. On the other hand, Celine, kind of a buff nerf. And I'll tell you why it's a little bit of a nerf. So they changed the nerf part is they took away her S2, the intuition. They took away the ignore damage sharing effect on the S2, and they gave it to the S3 and S1. Why is that a nerf? A lot of people, one legend player I actually know, uses Celine to kill Spectre Tenebria and Arrow Destina comps, because when they use Destina, the Celine goes, hits the Stena, ignores the Arrowell's escort, and kills the Stena. Now, your S2 is not going to kill that Stena, right? Because you are not ignoring damage sharing effects, right? So you cannot reach Stena anymore. It's a very small situation, but it's going to come up more than you think, because there are times where your Celine gets to do one S2 and she doesn't get to get S3. So they're kind of forcing her to be fast to take that S3. But there are situations where the opponent has tighter speed tuning where you're not going to cut, and all you get is an S2, and now you're potentially not going to kill a target if they have some form of mitigation, right? That kind of sucks, but of course, it now doesn't matter elemental at disadvantage. That's huge, because also people used to bring carrots to try to bait Celines. Well, now you're going to be hitting those carrots, those ML Iserias. Much harder to use ML Iseria, because she's going to be hitting the ML Iseria. She's not going to care. And of course, the S3 got the damage ignore. And the soulburn damage was increased. So she's going to be doing way more damage on the S3, way more versatile, overall a buff, right? I'm not trying to say Celine is worse now. It's just very interesting direction with what they did. She now actually relies on her whole kit rather than just the S2, which again, buff, nerf, kind of both. I mean, she definitely got more. She's definitely buffed, right? She's definitely better than she was before. There's a little bit different of where the strengths are. And then of course, last but definitely not least, Camilla. This is a very small buff, but huge for AI, for Ancient Inheritance. I actually use Camilla a lot in Ancient Inheritance, and the fact to get an extra turn now rather than just 50% is so big, because you can now just have a consistent dual attacking unit that attacks with your highest attack. I am very curious if this actually is going to be PvP viable for some cleavers. Why do I even mention that? Because extra turn, she actually gets to attack buff an ally, attack buff herself, get the extra turn, and get a guaranteed dual attack with that attack boosted ally, right? You couldn't do that. And she's a speed imprint. The fact that she's a speed imprint, she's going to be like, dude, she's going to be actually valuable for PvP. That's crazy. People are actually going to use her for speed racing. High-end legend speed racing is just a completely different beast. any speed imprint they can get that's viable, they're going to be using. And the fact that this is actually a pretty good viable one is pretty cool, right? You can actually open with her, get attack buff, get that extra turn, and then go in and slap someone and kill him. Actually pretty significant. But also for PvE, it's pretty good. Definitely an actually PvP viable unit. As far as the artifacts, just going very quickly over them. Samsara beads, they used to have a terrible passive before, which is raw stats that weren't even that crazy good. But now you get increased damage on single target attacks. And when attacked by a single attack, you decrease the damage suffered by 8 to 16%. So it's kind of a Draco Plate. It's basically Draco Plate, but a little bit different situation because it's just raw attack increase. So things like Rimuru could theoretically use this. Like the no crit Rimuru or units that just don't crit. Like no crit warriors. So theoretically, Hua could use this, except she kind of doesn't need that passive. But like a single, like something like a Hua. I can't think of the, like Emo Kawasu could theoretically use this, right? Because he gets extra damage on S1. Would he want this? Probably not. But again, it's nice to have kind of another type of Draco Plate that's not limited. Celestine, kind of nice for certain Soul Weavers. The only one I can think about is Ning Ning, because her S2 is a single target damage skill. Her S1 is a single target damage attack. I could think maybe Rin as well. Rin actually would be pretty big because her S2 gives her, I think she gets it, I don't know if it's extra turn or just CR. But Rin also has a single target skill. So some here and there, some nice PvE Soul Weavers, some nice little quality of life change. You can actually get a lot more healing on some Soul Weavers that are typically more aggressive, that are actually using skills to attack. You can also now use their skills to attack. I can only think mostly of Ning Ning right now. That's the best example because she's just a new unit. And this crossbow, increased hit chance is nice. Effectiveness also kind of nice. I don't see who you're going to be using this on. Maybe Briar Witch if you don't have Misha. And you really want to land those debuffs without Soulburn. That may be someone you want to consider using this on. But if you do have a Briar Witch not on Guiding Light, you're going to have immunity and you're going to lose against Zeo, which sucks. But it's just how it is with Rangers nowadays. And of course, you're always crit successful instead of just 100%. That basically means Charlotte is always going to crit on DN. Charlotte is always going to crit on Senya. But that is going to be all for this patch. Overall, it's going to shake up the meta for sure. If anything, the meta is going to get more aggressive, which some people could argue that it's pretty heavy Arrow with Destina right now. That's probably the most comfortable, most picked style draft. Or Luastene. Those are like the two big ones. And then the other really strong ones are Celia's Aggro, which Aggro just got massive buffs with Briar Witch and Astromancer Alencia. Briar Witch being the big one, right? Briar Witch is really going to push the envelope. Out of all the heroes, she's definitely going to potentially push the meta into a different angle because she counters a lot of the big heroes right now, right? Being able to strip and ignore Soulburn, that means you can land on Destina. You can't revive, so Destina can't revive the squishy targets. You can hit Light add-in, make sure you're actually able to kill her, Riley if you're strong against them. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a really strong unit. So it should definitely shake up the meta. And for Guild Wars, Astromancer Elena is going to make Guild Wars so free. If you have Astromancer Elena, I'm personally going to build mine, hopefully before those 2 weeks, and I hope I'm able to showcase it to you guys. At least in Guild Wars and Arena, I don't think I'll be able to have the gear or the damage to use her in RTA, but I'll definitely be using her in like Guild Wars and Arena, kind of so you can see the damage, see how it can help you with certain team compositions. But that is all I got for you guys today. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Peace.